Good morning, everyone. We're just going to check and make sure we can be heard in the Zoom webinar.
Yes, the audio is coming through loud and clear, Sam. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And okay, so Chair, we will be ready to begin on time.
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our September 27th, 2022 Board of Supervisors meeting. We'll call this meeting to order, and as customary, start with our moment of silence. We just wanted to see if there's any moment of silence that we have this morning.
We do have a moment of silence.
All right.
Go ahead and go.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a moment of silence for tribal elder for the Middletown Rancheria, Russell Davis. He passed natural causes Sunday morning. So I'd just like to give condolences to him and his family.
Kimberly, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next is the item 4, consideration of extra items not appearing on the posted agenda. Do we have any requests on that? It doesn't look like we do. We'll move to item 5, approval of the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are commonly designed to be non-controversial. However, they can be pulled for further discussion and also not only from the Board of Supervisors but also from the public. And so far, I know I have item 5.3 that's pulled until October 4th. 7.4, which is, well, that's not a consent agenda item. 5.8 for further discussion, and that will be done at a later time. And I don't know if there's any else from the board. I think Supervisor Sabatier.
5.2, and that's for following the next week or on a future agenda?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And so are there any from the board, requests from the board? I'll open it up to the public in case there is something that Anyone from the public would like to pull from the agenda, and I will look online as well. I don't see any hands up. I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Mr. Chair, move to approve items 5.1 and 5.4 through 5.7 from the consent agenda.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Let's see here. We are at 9:05, so we can go ahead and move on to our 6.1, which is public input. Commonly, public input is something that's not considered on the item for today, or agenda item for today. So that's something that you can bring up and discuss. Just know that the Board of Supervisors will not be able to comment or answer to this discussion. But however, we do have one. Joan Moss, if you'd like to come up and state your name for the record, and then we'll start your timer for the 3 minutes and go from there.
Joan Moss, I would like to ask you, the supervisors, to pass a resolution that takes money from your general fund and buys face masks. I understand from the administration that face masks are no longer mandated, and yet a lot of our officials have face masks. And I know at least one department head who publicly said that he was just getting over COVID. And I heard of another judge who's just getting over COVID. I think COVID, it's still an item that is an emergency, and it still needs to be addressed. And the people that come into the courthouse without a mask should at least have the gesture of goodwill that they can take a mask. And it's the security people that said you're no longer supplying a mask from the county. So the second thing I want to point out is a news item. Court orders federal government to produce records from top White House Human Health Services officials in Missouri Attorney General's lawsuit. I think this is our jurisdiction because we listen to the COVID report and we read Facebook and Twitter, and those are the items that have been censored, and other groups have been censored. So I would like you to point out that this is a lawsuit against people in high government. It includes President Biden and Fauci. And the last one I want to point out is that 21 counties have signed and supported Navy SEALs versus Biden over the mandated vaccines that Biden has tried to issue. Thank you. I have this more details because I only have. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
I want to get all the news, not just what the government approves of. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Joan. Are there any other people in the chambers that would like to come on up? State your name for the record, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Supervisor Crandall. Julia Carrera, Upper Lake, California. I'm here today at the request of the Upper Lake citizens who are circulating a petition due to the fact that they are not receiving the services they're entitled to receive in regard to the Upper Lake levee system, also known as the Middle Creek Diversion Project. This is the petition. It currently has 115 signatures on it, and more are being gathered, so I'm delivering this to you today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other, come on up and state your name for the record.
My name is Sam Boucher, and I live in Clear Lake Oaks. And I'm here to ask you guys to reconsider your refusing to
Sir,
waive
is it the fee?
well, this is on item 7.9.
Right, that's when we'll take that up. That was when we'll take that item up. You'll be able to speak during that time frame when we take the item on the agenda up.
Okay.
Yeah. And just so folks know, if you're here for that item, I plan on taking that up after lunch, 7.9. So that will either be at 1 or 1:30 for sure, but I've already determined that would probably be something we would take up at 1, as we have a really full agenda, but I don't want people waiting around not knowing when it's going to be discussed. So after 1 or after lunch will be the time we talk about 7.9. All right. Let's see, any other public input from the chambers? If not, I'm looking on Zoom. I don't see anybody from Zoom. Wait 1 second. Nope. Okay, bring it back to the board, and we'll close that item for public input and move on to our 9:10, which is presentation of employee service awards. This item will be, I'll give it to the CAO.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce Pam Zamek from Human Resources, and she will be making the presentations today to recognize employees.
Good morning, Pam Zamek, Human Resources Director. I also have Diana Rico, Deputy Director, with us. Twice a year, we honor our employees. And so we will be having each department head come up to honor their department employees and read the names. We'll call you in alphabetical order. First up. Okay.
Have you leaning over?
Thank.
Let's try that.
All right. Great.
And you look a little more comfortable.
Thank you. First up is Rich Ford from the Assessor Recorder's office.
Great. In our department, we're actually doing this by Zoom. And first up is Michelle Buganani, and she's been here 5 years. And she is actually an appraiser too, and she has done a lot of professional growth with our department, professional and personal, has achieved a lot as far as training and certifications. And she has spent most of those 5 years with us. So thank you very much for your service. And are we going to move on to the next slide, I'm thinking? There we go. So Brian Llewellyn is our cadastral person. He's also been with us 5 years. All those 5 years with our department, has done a tremendous amount of cleanup and progression with our cadastral. And has had tremendous personal growth. And we thank so much for his service for our department and for the county. Thanks, Ryan. Next up is Landai. She's been with us 10 years. And for the most part, she's been with me almost the entire time of those 10 years. She has actually had tremendous professional growth and actually is our chief at this point. Started off as an appraiser aide, and she has done tremendous things professional. She has actually just achieved an advanced appraiser during that time. And again, we really appreciate her service and appreciate all 3 of the people that achieved years of service. We have a great department, and these are just a great sampling of example of what's in our department. Thanks a lot, Landai.
Next, we have the Auditor Controller, Kathy Saderlich. We have Max Beard, who's been here 5 years.
Good morning, Board. Hopefully you can hear me now. I was just unmuted. So thank you, Board, for allowing the opportunity to highlight the dedicated county workforce. So you see Max's picture here, and today we're recognizing Max Beard for 5 years of county service. And Max began his employment with the county in special districts. He promoted to administration, and he's been a valued member of the Auditor Controller County Clerk team for almost 2 years now. So thank you, Max, for your dedicated service.
Next, I'd like to call up Todd Metcalf from Behavioral Health to honor his employees.
Thank you, Pam. We have 3 folks that we would like to celebrate 5 years of service with Behavioral Services, starting with Christine Andrus, our fiscal program manager. Thank you, Chrissy, for hanging in here these last 5 years. Next, we have Michael Moss. Oh, yes. She does deserve a round of applause. Actually, they all do. Michael Moss, our prevention specialist. I don't know how we could do the work we're doing without him. He is an extremely dedicated and passionate employee, amazing man, and thank you also, Michael, for hanging in here these last 5 years. Melissa Poplin, Staff Services Analyst 2. Also, another amazing, passionate, and dedicated employee, helping us get our data together. I know some of you on the board are interested in that. So I want to thank Melissa for also sticking around for 5 years. Hopefully 5 years more, or more. Anyway, thank you.
Next, we have Gail Woodward, Child Support Director. Is she in Zoom?
Nope.
Okay.
I think she's there.
All right. Well, we have Julie Vargo, who's been here 20 years. And Rosario Santana, who's been here 25 years. Next, we have Maria Turner, CDD Director.
Good morning. It's my honor to honor a couple of our employees for 5 years. Eric Porter from the Planning Division. He is a solid, experienced planner who takes more than his fair share of the workload in planning. My favorite part about Eric, now that I'm back in the department, is he doesn't just accept what I say because that's what I say. So we end up having these really great planning discussions, which I think the collaborative approach in planning ends up with a much better product for public service. And so I really value Eric. Tina is a dynamic member of our code enforcement team. We are so glad to have her back after she's been gone for just a little while, and she has just picked up and run with all the tasks that were waiting for her. One thing about Tina is, one second she's like a force of nature. She's just a strong personality, and then the next minute she's like laughing at something and just has like the joy of a child in her face. And I think it's all this multifaceted parts that make her her that actually benefit her out in the field. Because one of the things that code enforcement leads with first when we do our outreach is to bring people into self-abatement. And it's her non-judgmental, meet you where you are, let's get you to where you need to go kind of attitude, I think, that is so powerful for code enforcement and for our community. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call the District Attorney, Susan Cronus, to honor her employees.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm thrilled to honor these wonderful workers in the office and the DA's office for their service. It's been, they're all incredible people. So first of all, 10 years, Gloria Gregor, and she is a staff service analyst. She was in our office many, many years ago, and we just recently had her come back to our office. We're so excited that she's back. She knows so much about the way that to present services, and she has a wealth of information over the years when she was in the sheriff's office as well as now in our office. So we're very excited that she's back. So thank you so much. We have next 15 years, Crystal Martin, and she's our Victim Witness Program Administrator. She is a force of nature, really. She is so passionate about serving this community, especially children who are victims, and she is so compassionate with people every day, and she has so much patience as well with people. So she is just really thrilled to have her as the administrator of the Victim Witness Office. She is, I go to her for advice all the time. So thank you, Crystal.
I see Ms. Rico is ready to hand stuff out. Nobody's coming up.
Oh, okay. Yeah, come up and get your swag.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
And so next we have John Greger, who has 20 years. He is currently in our office as a DA investigator. He recently came over from the sheriff's office. Sorry, Brian. But I just remember first meeting John when I was a deputy district attorney, and he was handling several cases, and I was so impressed by him. He knew what he was doing. He had all the answers. He was experienced and very, very professional, and he's always been that way. So he's in our office as an investigator, and he is basically just going in full force, helping our deputy district attorneys prepare their cases, very serious cases too. So thank you so much, John.
Thank you for your service. If Gloria? Yeah. I'm like, they're here, but nobody's coming out. Thank you for your service.
Okay, up next we have Rachel. I know her as Rachel Abelson. That's her court name, so her office name. So she has 20 years. She's a senior deputy district attorney, and I can't say enough about how much I appreciate her work every day in the office. She volunteers to take on tasks when I'm away, when my chief's away. She does prayers, schedules, and everything. She has a wealth of experience. Everybody is always going to her and asking questions about legal issues, and she's dealt with them. If it's a legal issue, she's dealt with it. And she's so helpful to everybody in the office, and she's an excellent prosecutor. She has prosecuted and won major cases, including a murder case, as well as financial cases that involve a lot of records. I hate those cases, but she does a great job. So Rachel, come on up here. Thank you so much for 20 years. And we also have Tracy Davis with 25 years as a legal administrative assistant in our office. She, I think she came to our office, I was in the family support division, and she came into the office, I think a year before I came into the criminal division. She is a wealth of information, and I have to say, she has so much patience with the attorneys when we give her last-minute stuff. You just go to her and say, I need this in court, like in 10 minutes, and she does it. She knows how to do so much in the office. You don't have to tell her twice. She's so efficient, and she has saved lots of attorneys' behinds so many times. So she is so faithful to the office, and we greatly appreciate her. So Tracy, come on up.
Thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you.
Next, Shane French with IT.
Well, good morning. We have Angel Perez, who is an information systems analyst. He's been with us for the 5 years. And, you know, talk about somebody who is the definition of a team player, always willing to just jump right into whatever's thrown at him, never a complaint, and just has such a great attitude about everything that we do. And it's not always easy because we're a small department and everybody has to carry a big load. So I really appreciate him.
Next, we have Christopher with the library.
Hello, so today we're honoring Barbara Green, who has 15 years of service at the library as a library technician supervisor. Barbara does a huge variety of wonderful and very important tasks at the library, but probably her most important is leading weekly story times. Just this year, she passed 50,000 attendees at her weekly story times, and that's inspiring young kids to read. So we really appreciate everything Barbara does for our community.
Thank you so much for your service. Next, we'll be doing probation. Chief Rob Howe.
Good morning, Board. First, I have Cindy Rodriguez for 5 years of service. Cindy's actually benefited a few departments. She came to us fairly recently after serving Todd very well for, I think, the first 4 years of her career. She was kind of thrown into the fire with us doing much of our financial work. She's doing a great job. She's a staff services analyst, senior, promoted from staff services analyst, doing a great job. So thank her. And in 20 years, we have Ming Chao Chang, another one who's benefited multiple departments in our county. She spent the bulk of her career with county council before coming to us, I believe, in 2017. She came over as a legal secretary back when that's what it was called, and now she's a legal administrative assistant. And just like to thank both of them and everybody here. You know, our long-term employees are our foundation. We know we talk about recruitment and retention, and this is the big part of retention. They're our foundation, and without a foundation you can't stand, so thank you for all of our long-term employees.
Next, Lars Hewitt, Public Services Director.
Well, Aiden, why don't you come on up here? I don't want to talk about someone unless they're standing up here with me. So Aiden, and it won't be long, so by the time he gets up here, maybe I'm done. But Aiden, I'll come on up. Aiden Pearson, 15 years, all with Public Services, facilities maintenance lead worker. Prior to that, a technician. So as a lead worker, he's really the point person on most of the projects. He has a breadth of skill on building systems, HVAC, electrical, you name it, he knows it. So I want to thank him for his 15 years of service, but also uniquely from one Air Force vet to another Air Force vet, I want to thank you for that service as well. So Aiden, thank you very much.
Thanks. Next, we have Scott DeLeon, Water Resources and Public Works Director.
Good morning. I have two employees today. Unfortunately, one was on a scheduled vacation and the other is doing CPR training. So we're happy that she's at that. We'll start with our 20 years of service. This is Joe Matos. Joe is a heavy equipment operator 2 with our department. Been here for 20 years. A lot of his work very few people see because he operates our street sweeper and he has routes all over the county. He does his work early in the morning so as to not disrupt traffic. But a dedicated employee and does a great job for us. So Joseph Matos. Do you want me to do Yulia? Okay. The other employee we had is Yulia Osatrova.
Sorry.
There she is. No, but we're partnering with this and you're throwing me under the bus. Yeah. So Yulia is our water resources engineer 2. She's been with us 5 years, handles everything water resources engineering related, does a lot of work with our consultants and is at CPR training. So glad that she's been with us for 5 years, and thank you very much, Yulia.
Next, we have Sheriff Martin.
Good morning, thank you. We'll start out with the jail division. We'd like to recognize Deputy Sheriff Corrections Anthony Hodges for his 5 years of service. Anthony started out as a correctional aide and promoted a couple years ago to the rank of Deputy Sheriff Corrections and is a very influential on a lot of our newer employees out there. So thank you, Anthony. Eugene Ortega is our accountant, one of our accountant 2s, primarily works on the jail accounts. As you see in the picture, Eugene's got a big smile on his face. I don't think you'll ever catch him without a smile on his face. Just a joy to be around and always fun to work with and always has something nice to say when you run into him. Thank you, Eugene. And speaking of the jail, we like to make sure that the bars stay on the windows. Jeff Dolby is our facilities maintenance technician out there and ensures that happens. The jail is, I like to refer to it as Lake County's largest bed and breakfast, and it has a lot of demanding customers that come to visit. And Jeff, make sure that the facility runs smoothly. And thank you, Jeff, for your 10 years of service. And joining us today is Detective Dean Prater with 10 years of service. Dean is in our major crimes unit. Oh, Jeff's here. I didn't see Jeff back there. Come on up, Jeff.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
With 10 years of service, Dean Prater, he's in our major crimes unit. Dean also assists with the search and rescue. So when people go wandering out in the woods, Dean's available to help find their way home. Dean, come on up.
Sure. Thank you for your service.
Detective Todd Dunya with 15 years of service. I've had the pleasure of working with Todd from the beginning of his law enforcement career. We've had a lot of fun times together. Todd is a pleasure to have in the office. There's a few people around the office that will deal it out back to me as much as I deal it to them, and Todd's one of them. And unfortunately, this is going to be Todd's last Employee Service Award as he's announced his retirement. So I also want to congratulate him on reaching that milestone in his career and getting a service retirement later on this year. There's a lot of homes that are safer. There's a lot of children that have had justice brought to them because of Todd's good work over the years. And if you're a parent, you should be thankful if there's men like this that stand ready to serve in this community. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you for your service.
If you have the unfortunate need to call 911, Anna Silva is one of the people that's likely to answer the phone. One of those, this is probably one of the rare times that you'll see the face of a 911 dispatcher, but that's Anna up there on the screen. For 15 years of service, She's been through all of the fires that we've experienced together in this county. She's dealt with literally thousands of emergency calls over the course of her career, and one of our top-notch, very professional public safety dispatchers, Anna Silva. Thank you for 15 years of service. With 20 years of service, Jason Finley. Jason's been here longer than I have. There's a few people that have. He's one of them. And as far as running the jail, I don't think there's anybody out there that knows more about the ins and outs of running the jail, the various rules and regulations. We have laws we have to follow. We have regs that the state passes down. We have personalities that need to be managed. And Jason's been there through all of it. We've had lots of fun times. We've had an evacuation where we had to move everybody out, and Jason was there for that. I want to thank Jason for his years of service with the Lake County Sheriff's Office and Lake County Jail. This gentleman I've known almost my entire life. I grew up playing baseball with his older brother and hanging around with him, coming around to watch the baseball games. With 25 years of service, our Marine Services Sergeant, Sergeant Andy Davidson, spending all 25 years of his career right here with the Lake County Sheriff's Office. I want to thank him for the countless calls for service that he's had, both on patrol and both out on the streets and out on the lake. Andy Davidson.
Next, we have Social Services. Crystal Markenhead.
Good morning. Good morning, Board. Can we have everybody come up? Yeah, all the staff that have come in today. Let's just go ahead and come on up.
I'm not being recognized.
Okay. Okay. Good morning. So this morning, I would like to recognize a number of staff from the Department of Social Services. And just to reiterate something that I heard somebody say earlier, it is so important for us to do what we can to retain our the people that we have employed at the department, and recognizing them here is one way to do that. And we just really value people that join the organization, stay with us, and grow with us. So I'd like to start out with 5 years is Louisa Correa Gray with eligibility. And I don't think Louisa is here. Next, at 10 years, we have Janice Devins, eligibility specialist 2. Jeanette Moffett, 10 years, currently serving as Staff Services Analyst 1. 2? 2. Thank you, Jeanette. Stephanie Albright, Eligibility Specialist Supervisor. She is not here, but I'd like to thank Stephanie. Bobby Chambliss with Adult Services for 15 years, Social Worker 3. Dina Eddings Green, our Area Agency on Aging Coordinator. Thank you. And last but not least, William Bill Andrade, 20 years as an Eligibility Specialist Supervisor. Thank you.
Next, we have Special Districts.
Good morning, Board. Today we're here to honor and recognize one of our employees, long-term employees,
Roberta Castellani. She's been with us for 10 years, and she actually started with the Treasurer Tax Collector's Office in 2011 as an extra help employee and helping them through the tax payment season in December through February. Hired full-time on with our department in the following year, 2012, and has been with us ever since. She was an accounting technician when hired. That job classification was then turned into a utility billing specialist, and that's what she does. She's responsible for the account management of over 11,000 sewer accounts. So she tracks and bills all the sewer accounts for us, generates revenue for our department to help keep us afloat. A wonderful person in the office, very knowledgeable, has a lot of history and understanding of how things work. Great to be around, really friendly, and she's, oh gosh, just a great individual. We are extremely lucky to have her, and just want to thank her for her service.
Next, we have Chair Eddie Crandall to honor our department heads.
All right, so I'll start off with Jonathan Armis, the Animal Control Director. And Jonathan rose through the ranks. He's a younger man, and when he came into the position as Animal Control Director, he has done a lot to bring this department into, he wanted to serve and wanted to do well, and he has done well. I always appreciate his willingness to inform the public. He also is always positive. You know, I just witnessed in a recent meeting with the public that he just, took the questions, even though some frustrated people were making comments, and he just tried to do his best, and always appreciating that. Sometimes he's understaffed, but he makes it happen and does what he can. So thank you, Jonathan, and if you're here, please come up. Maybe I should go up there.
Yes. The 5-year awards in HR.
Thank you.
The 5-year awards go to the department directly.
Right, and our next person is Crystal Marketan. She is our social services director, and just working with Crystal, she has oversight of one of the biggest departments, and it also works with our vulnerable community, and just always working with emergency response as well in situations when we have power safety shutoffs, emergencies during fires, things of that nature, always willing to help. I also appreciate anytime there's a situation with the seniors and I have to give you a call, always willing to call back and do what you can. And so just wanted to thank you for that, and congratulations on your 5 years.
5-year awards go directly to the department.
They would go
to the departments directly.
All right. Next, we have Rich Ford. Rich Ford is our Assessor Recorder. Always appreciate our discussions. He conducts his trainings with his department quite frequently, always invites us. I'm not sure if we make it, but I know I've made a couple of them, and just always love the discussion with him. He knows in depth, has ideas, is always there working with his folks, giving them extra cross-training, things like that, always trying to think outside the box, and I really appreciate his service and commitment, and it looks like he'll be with us for 4 more years as well. So, Rich, congratulations. Next is Christopher Veach, 15 years of service, our county librarian, and I just appreciate, he loves his job. This is a man that loves his job, always thinking of ideas to educate the public and provide that service for them. Whenever we talk or have discussions, he's like, well, let's try this, let's try that, and works to get some sort of funding to ensure that his department libraries are always open, even willing to provide cooling centers for during situations when it's hot and we don't have spaces to go. So just always willing to help. Not only that, always looking to find ways to better serve the public in his library. And I do appreciate, we came up with a theme song. He hasn't used it yet, but we had a discussion about that too. So Christopher, thank you for your service.
For your service.
All right. Thank you. Christopher, you got. Oh. Yeah. All right. Last but not least, our district attorney for 30 years, Susan Cronus. And, I didn't write anything down because I kind of appreciate the fact that she is an Army veteran as well, and I am, except for she was a captain. I was a non-commissioned officer, but still, Army strong, right? Or be all you can be. I'm not sure where they're at now, but Susan, she'll be with us for 4 more years as well. Sometimes has situations where she has to do the cases. She doesn't directly have the privilege to be a complete oversight attorney. She has to take the time and do the work, and help her staff. And so always appreciating that, always appreciating her coming to the public events that we have and working with the public and doing what she can. And so it looks also like she'll be here for 4 more years as well. So Susan, thank you very much for your service and congratulations.
And as always, I have to be in court in a few minutes. Thanks, everybody.
All right. So I think that concludes everyone. So again, thank you all for your service. We appreciate the work you do. To be committed the way you are is what holds this county up. It keeps us strong, and we're hoping to get more people like you to do the work that we need to get done in order for this, this to keep moving on. And, so I think we're in a good space. We appreciate employees like you, and so thank you again.
Get sent right to him. Yeah.
So we're at 9:46. Yeah, you want to take one? Yeah. We're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute break and come back at 9:55.
He's not ready to fly the nest yet, so it's good to have somebody around.
All right. We do, yeah, I have a couple others. Yeah, I know. All right, welcome back. Welcome back from our break. It's looking like we're moving on to our next item on the agenda, which is our 6.3, public hearing consideration of proposed rezone RZ 22-02 and negative declaration initial study 22-19, applicant Daniel Sosa, project location 3774 and 3794 East Highway 20 Nice, APN 032 181 02 and 03. What is that? And 03. Okay, so with that, I'll give the floor to Director Maria Turner.
Thank you. If it pleases the board, we'd like to request a continuance of this item to October 18th meeting. At the last moment, we realized that our ordinance was not in the correct format and our motions are not exactly as they should be, and we'd really like this item to go smoothly since it's a very straightforward project.
All right. Are we okay with that? Do we have a good time, or is there a time certain or anything like that, or we'll just to be determined for now?
I'm certain would be good, though, avoid having to republish.
All right. Do you think the same time would be great, 10 a.m.?
If it's an open time slot, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right. So thank you for that. What I'll do is I still need to open it up to the public just in case, and we'll see if there's, I don't think anyone from the board has a comment. So I'll open it up to the public. Is there anybody on the public here on this item? And I'll look on Zoom and... Sure. Oh, yeah. Okay, come on up, sir.
Hi, my name is Daniel Sosa. I am the applicant. I thought the item was going to happen today, but that's okay. And just since I'm here, I just wanted to just introduce myself and let you guys know that the rezone is for the purpose of eventually opening a cannabis dispensary there, and I look forward to opening a really well-operated, clean business that is a economic positive impact in the neighborhood, and I have a lot of experience in doing it, several years operating dispensaries. So I just wanted to say I look forward to it, and I'll see you guys on the 18th for the next hearing. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And from what I understand, it's the item on the agenda is solely for a rezone, and it hasn't. We're not deciding on a dispensary or anything of that nature. It will go through the common practice of a use permit and whatnot at a further date. We are only solely dealing with the rezone. And so I'll close public input, bring it back to the board, and I see Ms. Grant has something to state. So.
Just a suggestion, Mr. Chair, because you do want to avoid having the cost of republication, again, if you could do the continuance by motion.
Okay, sounds good. Can I entertain a motion to continue to October 18th at 10:30 or 10 a.m.?
So moved.
All right, so I have a motion and I have a second. Actually, it looks like we have a panelist, I think. Johanna, would you like to unmute? And,
yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
We have assessment appeals at 10 on the 18th.
Oh, let's, what is a better time would you prefer? Or not prefer, but what do you think would be a better time? For that agenda purpose, if that makes sense.
You could do 10:30.
Okay, we'll do, does 10:30 sound amenable? Would that be for community development as well? Okay. So just maybe adjust that motion to 10:30 as opposed to 10, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Johanna.
I amend my motion to 10:30.
Okay. Second. And I do have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And opposed? And motion carries. And so we will address that item October 18th at 10:30 a.m. All right. With that, so there's no more timed items on today. We will move on to, let's take care of 7.3 briefly. Consideration of the following advisory board appointments: Hartley Cemetery, And it looks like we have Larry Caravario, and so that's in my district. Of course, it's a reappointment. Don't know if anyone has a comment. I don't have one. Open it up to the public briefly to see if there's anyone that has a comment on this, and not seeing anyone. Bring it back to the board. I'm not seeing any on Zoom, and so we'll go ahead and entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the reappointment of Larry Caravario to the Hartley Cemetery.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, and motion carries. We'll move on to 7.2, which is consideration of appointments of a director and alternate to the California State Association of Counties Board of Directors for 2023. Let's see here. Susan, would you like to take this one and introduce it?
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual exercise by this board to appoint to the CSAC as a board representative and an alternate for 2022 through 2023. Are there any nominations?
And so commonly, I think right now you're the current, Supervisor Sabatier is the current primary, and so...
And Supervisor Scott used to be the alternate. At this point, there's only one person in there. I'm definitely volunteered to continue unless somebody else wants to take that over. But I don't know, do we have to have an alternate right now? Do we, is that a must?
It's not a must, just recommended.
Okay.
I'll be the alternate.
Excellent. So
I would agree with that, especially on the work we got going on, so yes.
All right. I think we have what we need there. So is there any comments from the public on this? Not hearing any. I'll look online and see if there's anybody from the public that would like to comment, and not seeing anyone on Zoom as well. So I'll bring it back to the board for action.
Do we need to do two separate, or can I do one motion on this?
You can do one motion here.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I move to appoint Representatives Sabatier and Paiska as director. Let's see, I'll get it right here. I move to appoint Supervisor Sabatier as their director and Supervisor Paiska as alternate to CSAC Board of Directors for 2023.
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, and motion carries. I will read 7.4, but I can tell, I already know it's going to be pulled until October 4th, but consideration of resolution authorizing application for grant funding under the Regional Climate.
Could we just move this to after lunch?
Oh, yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, and so let's see what we have here. All right, so let's move on to 7.6. Well, no, let's do that at 10:30 if we can. How about consideration of resolution of intention to the Lake County Board of Supervisors to initiate an amendment to the zoning ordinance relating to appeals? And so with that, it's downloading, and so Supervisor Sabatier, if you'd like to, it has your name as, but is this Anita's? No, okay.
So as I heard that, I realized that it's a resolution of intention from the Lake County Board of Supervisors, not to the Lake County Board of Supervisors. And hopefully, Ms. Grant will still allow us to be able to move forward with that. Okay. A long time ago, over the course of the 4 years, we've had a few appeals, and a lot of times we get like a 100-page document dropped on us at 8:30 in the morning, or maybe less than 24 hours left. And we've had the discussion in, are we supposed to take this into consideration? What do we do with it? And typically what happens is we delay our process. So one of the things I wanted to make sure is catch up on some of the things that we kind of said that we wanted to see coming back to the board. Here, as you see in my resolution of intent, this is going to the Planning Commission because this would also change their appeal process. So I want to make sure that they have a ability to provide feedback on these changes rather than just forcing the changes onto them. And then it would come back to us with their recommendation. What I'm recommending is putting a 96-hour time limit. That way we can make sure the public is aware of what this documentary evidence is. We have the chance to digest this documentary evidence, and that way everyone can come prepared for the appeal process and be able to go through the process and hopefully to have a conclusion. This doesn't prohibit anyone from coming up to the microphone and providing any other information, just like we have at the last, we don't get testimonies ahead of times from the public who come and speak up during these appeal processes. So this doesn't prohibit people's right to speech, but it does allow us to be a little bit more transparent and a little better prepared than some of the circumstances that we've had in the past. And so I wanted to bring this back to see if the board is still interested in moving forward. And again, moving forward would mean submitting this to the Planning Commission and then coming back to us for a final decision.
All right. Supervisor Simon.
Yeah, so, obviously, I think it's a good change. Been a part of that, just as you said, over the last 6 years, when we're trying to keep projects moving forward. And, I think it's a good change, and I completely support approving it today to be sent back to the Planning Commission for review and bring it back to the board for hopefully approval. I think it helps both sides. Hundreds of page documents that you get before something, especially on, even if it's a small projects we want to move forward to help our county be better. I just think it's a great opportunity for us to continue the process for our constituents and our public. So good job, Supervisor Butty. Thank you for bringing it back.
Thank you.
All right. No, if there's no other questions, I'll open it up for the public. If there's anyone from the public who'd like to comment on item 7.5.
Don Van Pelt, Lake County resident. I have to say on the appeal process, to put a time frame of 4 days, 96 hours, when the citizens of Lake County don't get the appeal until Friday afternoon, is putting a time restraint on people trying to get their paperwork ahead of time to do that. Now, I'm not opposed to a 96-hour time limit. Maybe the supervisors need to post their things a little sooner than Friday afternoon so people have time to react to it, is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Joan Moss, I wanted to file an appeal. I could not afford to. And I had some good points. It was an illegal hydrology study. I did file a drought complaint, which is still in the works. And the property has been, half of it has been sold since then. And the fact that it was sold isn't registered up on the county. So I'm still working on it. I'm a fighter, especially when my own land is threatened. So I think there's more than a time frame that needs to be adjusted. That's what I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Any other comments from anyone in the chambers? Seeing none, I will look towards Zoom. I'm not seeing any hands up for this item. I'll wait a couple seconds. Bring it back to the board for further discussion or action, and I would just go ahead and like to say that I know there's some folks that I've had the same discussion with about having a further extensive opportunity to look through the document. So I really feel this is going to help as well for that. So I appreciate the work on this. So I don't know if there's any other comments, but...
I will comment at least on the question about the timeline. Again, this doesn't prohibit anyone from bringing testimony or speaking up during our appeal process. This is more along the lines of those who are involved in the appeal process. Those are the ones who have been historically submitting to us those big packets of evidence. They know when the appeal is coming, and having a 96-hour allows us, who have a 72-hour deadline to post our agenda, to be able to take in that document and then make sure that it's part of the attachment. So again, I think it increases the transparency level of the process.
For the public.
For the
also see what's been
exactly, for the public and for us to be able to digest the information and be able to put it into context of the appeal that we're dealing with.
Right. I think what's been missing is that transparency with the public. So having that within the window to post the agenda, I think is appropriate.
All right. Ms. Grant?
I just did want to clarify that, keep in mind that when your board receives documentation, the public's entitled to receive it too, so.
All right, thank you.
And if there's no further discussion, I offer the resolution.
Resolution has been offered.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like that item can move forward to the next stage. With that, we'll move on to, how about 7.8? How does that look?
Hidden 7.8?
Yeah, well, the second 7.7. Supervisor Pyska, do you think that would be?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's county council's item.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anita. So this item, I'll read it off. I didn't even read it off. I'm just, consideration of retention of specialized legal services to address PG&E's wildfire mitigation activities. And this will be presented by County Council Anita Grant.
Yes, thank you, Board. Referencing Supervisor Pyska is certainly appropriate here because it was through her diligence that we became aware of Ms. Samanji and her expertise in the area of taking PG&E to task for some of its decisions with regard to not only power safety shutoffs, but certainly when it comes to felled trees. So this matter is before you today to offer as a tool for the county Ms. Samaji's expertise. You'll see her retention letter is attached. The summary of her experience is provided in the memo to your board. Certainly, the level of her expertise is likely unmatched in most parts of California when it comes to taking on PG&E, and I would foresee that she would probably be working, at least at this juncture, in more of a consultant capacity in moving forward. There is also, I hope, and this may be something your board wishes to consider, the opportunity for multiple counties who are undergoing the same issues with regard to felled trees and lack of responsiveness on some occasions from PG&E to join together to retain Ms. Samanji for issues going forward. And so it's presented with that thought in mind. The administrative office has identified a funding source for this for your board to move forward if you wish to do so. So I'll turn it over now to the CAO.
Yes, we've identified in the admin office a consultant line. We recommend an amount not to exceed $50K at this time.
Vice Chair Pyska?
So in my conversations with other supervisors from other counties about PG&E's vegetation work and also the fast trip outages and PSPS outages, that's how I came to meet Megan Samanji and actually attended an RCRC forum with the CPUC president where counties were telling their stories about the outages and how impactful they are to our communities. So the other counties have already engaged her, and because as our county council has said, she is one of the leading forces and experts in dealing with PG&E and CPUC. So I agree that a $50,000 limit is appropriate now, and I'm hoping that we can join some of the other regional groups that have already signed on with her. And we're just going to see how explore the relationship as we immediately talk about PG&E and the tree work, as you know, going back to the discussion we had a couple of weeks ago, you know, expanding the area where they're going to be doing tree removal. And looking at that as it impacts the entire county.
All right. Any other comments from the board? Supervisor Sabatier?
I have a question about the other counties. What has come out of there, or is it too soon to be able to tell?
No, so Napa, Marin, Sonoma, and sometimes Mendocino have been using her with PSPS issues and the fast trip outages. And also Napa engaged her after their wine country fires to deal with cleanup issues with PG&E and hold them accountable for removing like 900,000 trees, something like that. So that's how I came to learn about her work, through those supervisors and their experience and the success rate that they achieved.
And I know that some of the issues is the current tree trimming that's going on and the lack of being cleaning up. I know that there's some historical issues when I reviewed the September 13th video, because I wasn't here for that one, of years past. Do you think that it can help with the historical stuff that still exists that hasn't been cleaned up, or is it only for ongoing new stuff?
Well, that's what we'll ask her for help with, because we do have quite a lot of things that are laying around and haven't been cleaned up since before last winter when they agreed to do that wood haul. They only did it, they started the end of February, and then they paused it in August and are restarting. So there's significant work that's happened, but also they're only doing the wood haul in this circle around the Cobb area. And as all of us know, we're experiencing tree mortality throughout the county. So we do need this assistance.
So I will say that there definitely is some on and off, because I know that there is wood hauling happening in the Clear Lake area, but it's definitely not to say it's happening all the time. And I know typically they say 4 inches or less is what they do haul.
But that number changes a lot too.
And I've heard 10 inches during the meeting that happened on the 13th. One of the things that I'd like to suggest, if I'm going to say yes to this, is I think we have policies that we can create to help the future of this, whether that's holding PG&E accountable, maybe through some sort of code enforcement ordinance or something along those lines, or whether it's what people can put underneath the lines. Because yes, I know there's undergrounding that's happening, but there's so many miles of wires, it's going to take a long time to get there. But right now, if I wanted to plant a tree underneath the power lines, I could, and eventually it becomes an issue. And so who has to cut it and who's responsible for it? Maybe we need to look at some of those things to help keep our wires clear, and also maybe have an open door for us to hold them accountable through our code enforcement. So I'd like to look at what policies we can look at, as well as doing that.
I think that's a separate item. This is just engaging legal counsel.
And I'm saying in the future, I would like to look, I don't want to talk specific policy like today.
Well, maybe bring that as a separate item, but let's just keep the focus on this letter of engagement with this legal counsel.
Those were my statements.
Okay.
Supervisor Simon?
Yeah. You know, obviously, you know, PG&E is something we're going to be dealing with all the time. I know that we do have communications. I know that obviously they can do better. They sat right here and said that in bringing back the tree program and some of the other things. I would always look at, you know, I hear Supervisor Sabati saying this a lot, making sure that we're, you know, we're spending our taxpayer dollars in the right way. And I want to make sure that we just don't sign an agreement and say, well, this could help with anything. Really would like to request that we have a meeting. If we're going to engage this, we get it started, that we have that conversation with her as a board. You know, I don't know if that's an open session item, or closed session item. Open session item, sounds like that we continue that conversation to really look at it, because, you know, just saying $50,000 to pay this individual, you know, help us with PG&E issues. I know we each and all deal with them directly for our districts to help they do that. So we'd definitely like to have that follow-up conversation if we're going to move forward with this today.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is just a letter of engagement, but what we ask for this work, I think we should all agree on and develop that strategy so we have it moving forward together.
Because ultimately, what we're looking to do is just protect our community.
Yes.
You know, as the utility is growing. And I completely agree with some of that idea with us, and as we're expanding this system, because we're not in control of that. Obviously, if someone wants to put in a big development and has to have 4 new poles brought in to get that development created, understanding what that is. And I think there are some things that could be done with each development as we move forward. So I think your discussion is very pertinent on how we expand this system, and maybe that expansion's all underground now. So that might be the conversation. If you want to build something, it's got to be underground, and figure out that partnership. So I know, Anita, you have some comments, so I'm going to.
Thank you, sir. I think that one of the things I should mention here is that this law firm Ms. Samaji is looking to ensure that there is no pre-existing conflict issue. That effort is ongoing, and there still needs to be a discussion, which we're trying to arrange for tomorrow. So if your board is interested in moving forward with this, then you can simply indicate that today, and this can come back. I would suggest that there be a clear scope of work, and I can inquire of Ms. Samanji if she's available. She can appear via Zoom to answer questions of your board as you consider that. The other part of this I would suggest is that there are certain controls with regard to contact, because Ms. Samanji is a laborer worthy of her hire, so you've seen her hourly and that of the second who would work. When you combine those efforts, that is a significant amount of legal fees, and many, many questions from multiple people will expend that $50,000 well before you're prepared to have it be exhausted. So there are other additional controls. Your board may want to just indicate today by consensus that you're agreeable to go forward. We can clear the conflict. I don't anticipate any problem in that at all, but Ms. Samanji's firm is diligent and should be so to ensure that there's not an issue. So we'll have that cleared hopefully by tomorrow. And if it comes back next Tuesday with a scope of work, and if Ms. Samanji is available to answer questions of your board, once you review it, you can certainly change it or add to it any way you like, and that can be in an open session of the board.
All right. Supervisor Sabatier?
So I know this throws a wrench in it, but with PG&E being such a hot topic for the last 5 or more years, when this comes back to us, which yes, absolutely, the scope of service needs to be very specific as to what the requirements are, and maybe even goals and objectives and criteria to meet. But are we looking at the way that we're going about this? We're looking at waiving the bidding process? I'm sure there's a lot of lawyers out there that do this.
This goes under the consultant selection process, legal services or specialized services, and expressly exempt.
Okay. Thank you for that answer.
All right. I'm not seeing any other comments from the board. I'll open it up to the public for this item. Come on up and state your name for the record, and we'll start your 3 minutes.
I'm Joan Moss. I live on Wildcat Road. I cry when I drive down. I want to know what funding source is going to be used for this, because you're mentioning a funding source, but you're not saying what the source is.
We just did. It's from the administration's budget, from the contracting line.
Consultant line.
What is it again?
Consultant line, where
You have a fund just for consulting?
a lot of different departments do, yes.
Okay, is that under the county budget?
I will let CAO answer.
Yes, it is.
Okay. I want to suggest that there is a communication problem with PG&E, and I want to suggest that there is a communication with Ms. Paisica. I wrote a letter April 15th. She finally got it a month ago, and she responded right away when I had a question. So I am in between. I am in between citizens who want to go after Ms. Paisica. I want to go after PG&E and improve nature. Nature needs improvement. $450 an hour is quite a bit to spend with someone who won't even go to court. It says in the materials that she will not go to court. And I'm asking Ms. Peiska and you people, instead of just communicating with each other, to communicate with the neighbors on Wildcat Road who are unhappy and who are suffering. And I always get nervous when I get up here. But I want to know if, and I'm not going to do this myself, but if the neighbors file a claim against Lake County about this mitigation and PG&E, is this consultant going to defend Lake County or going to be sympathetic with the neighbors and the people who are suffering? This one woman is suffering. She said that they took 600 trees off of this elder's property. Now, that's an exaggeration. I called the fellow up. They didn't take 600 trees off of his property. But there are people that are that unhappy that are going to do something. And I want to know if this consultant is only going to help Lake County and go after PG&E, or if this consultant is going to help the people whose trees are gone. Thank you.
Joan. And so,
And laying around.
Ms. Grant, would you like to comment briefly before we let the vice chair comment? So.
The county can't act on behalf of private individuals, so no one the county retains can do that because it's a gift of public funds under the Constitution. Hopefully, the big picture is going to be a benefit to everyone who lives here because there can be an incidental private benefit. It just can't be the primary purpose. And Ms. Samanji is hired. She will not be responding to claims because that's a precursor to litigation. The county has, for the last 30 years, had a third-party administrator for that who will respond. And trust me, while there are claims and actions where one's heart may break, as your boards may when you're sitting in your quasi-judicial capacity, that is not the touchstone for decision-making under the law.
Thank you for that. And Supervisor Peiska.
So I've only received 2 calls, one from Ms. Moss, another from another woman who is making complaints on about other people's property. So, you know, these complaints are with PG&E, but I'm happy to forward complaints on once I get them, as I did with Ms. Moss's complaint. So I hear every week when you say that there's all these people that are so upset, yet they're not contacting me, and except for one other individual. And that individual didn't have a complaint on her own property, so there wasn't anything I could do to help. This is PG&E's work. It is their responsibility, but I often do forward complaints for property owners if they feel like they're not being heard.
All right. Supervisor Simon?
Yeah, just want to remind Ms. Moss, just as Supervisor Price said, this is a privately owned utility. We work, you know, with PG&E to hopefully just bring those complaints forward and to bring that message from our community. We constantly do that, whether it's through our advisory councils that we have. PG&E is routinely asked to come to Math. I know they go to Cobb Area Council. They most likely attended your 3 advisory councils to get that message out there, not only just to talk about the utilities, but the undergrounding work that's happening, many other issues that go on. So it's communication. We don't just talk amongst ourselves. These are complaints that we get from our constituents, and we forward those on. I think this is just a continuing conversation of the frustration of the, you know, the leftover dead trees that are constantly cut out and left in our community. So we had that. It was brought here by Supervisor Peiska right here at this board on the 13th. We had the discussions. They reinitiated a program, and I know everybody is either on one side of keep the trees or have them removed. And it's a hard conversation, but we'll continue to be that conduit to help our constituents get the message forward to this private utility. And we know there are issues, so this is just a continuing conversation with this engagement letter if we're going to move forward as a board. So hopefully it's bringing those messages forward, exactly what you're asking for, Joan, communicating with our constituents as they're dealing with these issues.
All right. Any other, go ahead, Supervisor. Yeah, any other public comment from this item, for this item? I'm not seeing any on Zoom as well, and so I'll wait a couple seconds because I always don't, and then I close it, and then some hand comes up. All right, so I will close public input at this time, bring it back to the board for Supervisor Sabatier.
Obviously, one of the board's goals is safety. We've dealt with enough fires. We don't want to create more fuel or allow more fuel to sit around, so we need to deal with this. I, too, have concerns about the $450 an hour. That is extremely high. And I also don't know that we've tried everything available to us before jumping to that. However, this is just saying, yes, let's go ahead and look at a draft agreement to see what that looks like. And so today I'm going to be voting yes to let's move forward and let's take a look at that and let's continue the discussion.
All right. There's no other comments. Do we just, the consensus to move forward is all we need?
Well, I'd like to, if we're going to be developing the scope of work for next time, we can ask her about the groups, the county groups that have been formed for the outages, and if there's a way for us to join that as a cost savings rather than do it on our own. That's directly related to the fast trip outages and the PSPSs, and that's the conversation that's happening with RCRC and the CPUC. And so if there are groups that are formed and there's a cost savings for us to get in on that, because it was, I was told by RCRC, you're not part of these groups? Why aren't you part of these groups? So, I think that's going to be a benefit to all of us living in these rural communities. We're just getting into our high wind weather. We're going to see more and more outages in September, October, hopefully not November. So if we could look at that as part of the scope too, I think that would be beneficial.
Ms. Grant?
If your board agrees, I can certainly contact Ms. Samanji. I don't know what her schedule is like this week, so I can't promise the time of a response. She's very responsive, but obviously it depends upon what else is going on. And get an idea then if the plan would be to simply attempt to join the groups that are dealing with the PSPSs, then this would be essentially an agreement to work with PG&E to address the felled trees or trees to be felled that have been felled, and how PG&E is going to work. There are certain funds that PG&E has already set aside for these plans, so it's not as if there isn't money in certain pockets of PG&E, if you will.
Right.
And we can bring that back, and then if Ms. Samanji is available for this next Tuesday, may I ask if she's not available for this Tuesday but the next, would that be all right for your board?
I think we have a holiday.
The 17th, if it's not the 18th. So if not the 4th, the 18th?
Yes.
Okay, she may need more lead time, obviously, than that.
Sure.
So then all we need is a consensus, or would a motion be needed on this?
Yes, you're just instructing me at this point, so consensus is fine.
All right. With that, it looks like no further discussion on this is needed, so we can close this item and move forward on our agenda. With that, we'll move on to our 7.6, which is consideration of resolution of intention of the Lake County Board of Supervisors to initiate the following amendments: an amendment to Chapter 5 of the Lake County Code relating to permitting ag-exempt and temporary ag structures, an amendment to Chapter 27 of the Lake County Code regarding mitigation fees, and an amendment to Article 68 of the zoning ordinance regarding definitions of temporary building types. And with that, Supervisor Sabatier, I know you brought this to the agenda, so I'll let you go ahead and introduce.
So I want to thank first the folks that I met with and had discussions with. This started with our previous director of community development and continued on with Director Turner, met with Air Quality District, met with, and of course some staff from community development, including our chief building inspector, met with our ag commissioner, met with the Farm Bureau, met with the Cannabis Alliance, and met with the Fire Protection District, Lake County Fire Protection District, as well to discuss these new changes. My attempts was to get this to the board a whole lot earlier so that there would be the ability to look at getting some of these structures for harvest season. I failed to make that happen in a timely fashion, but rather than wasting the work that I did, I thought I would still bring it to the board. And again, the idea today is only to move this forward so that the Ag Advisory Board, which is important to have a review of this since we're looking at changing some of the ag exempt language, and also the Cannabis Task Force can review that, provide that feedback and recommendations back to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has the ability to make their changes and their recommendations, which then comes back to us. So today is just step one for all the work that's been done for a couple of months. So the purpose is to provide hemp and cannabis ability to drive. We've been through some of these issues where there is a gridlock for something that is providing us some decent tax dollars, yet we don't have everything available for them to be able to accomplish from planting a seed all the way to the end without going through what I would suggest is outside of the scope of what ag should have to deal with. They shouldn't have to go through this. The problem is no approved access to ag exempt buildings or temporary buildings. Agricultural operation is solely forced to go through the building permit process similar to that of a house. In the state of California, I will show later, it is ag, and so why are we not giving them that option to be able to follow what other ag operations do? In the state for ag exempt buildings, it states a structure designed and constructed to house farm implements, hay, grain, poultry, livestock, or other horticultural products. This structure shall not be a place of human habitation or a place of employment where agricultural products are processed, treated, or packaged, nor shall it be a place used by the public. Basically, you can walk in there and store stuff, put stuff away, but then it's not a place you can hang out in. No break rooms, no nothing like that in there. USDA identifies horticulture as that branch of agriculture concerned with growing plants that are used by people for food, for medicinal purposes, and for aesthetic gratification. California State Law and Business and Professions Code, Division 10, Chapter 6, Licensed Cultivation Sites, 26060A1. For the purposes of this division, cannabis is an agricultural product. When you move on to, this is our current code for exempt structures. There's only one restriction, and that is that you need to have at least 10 acres. Other than that, it talks about you need to submit a plot plan to show what other buildings are around, where you're going to be locating the building, and that you have to have authorization from the property owner, and confirm that the proposed structure is for bona fide agricultural use. Basically, I know in the past, when looking into ag exempt, you can only request for an ag exempt building once agricultural operations have begun. You can't have it as a prospective activity in the future, so that we don't get a whole bunch of ag exempt barns or buildings put up that eventually do not get used. And then the last part that was on there was just if you're in the FEMA flood, you still need to follow the standard practices of reviewing those things and making sure your agricultural building is going to be safe. That was the limits of our ag exempt code. When looking at all the different counties all around us, and I hope this isn't taken in the wrong way, I looked for the most country area of California, and I keep thinking of my friend Ned Coe up in Modoc County, and they have a lot of limitations on what ag exempt, including that they go all the way down to 1 acre, not 10 acres, but you're limited to 800 square feet. You're limited to height, you have setbacks and all of those things. We are in an era where safety is definitely something to think of. And I'm sure farmers think of safety, but we have no regulations, which mean if somebody wanted to put it right on the property line, they could. If somebody wanted to put it right next to a house, they could. There was no limitations that we had within our ordinance to make it so. And because I wanted to add something, another industry to be able to have access to ag-exempt buildings, I wanted to review the ag-exempt code. And so here's the proposal. It would allow cannabis operations to apply because the state says that they are agricultural products, that cannabis is an agricultural product. It would add setback restrictions from both buildings and property lines. It would add height and size restrictions of the buildings, fire safety standards for the number of exits and distance between the exits, codify electricity and plumbing addition to buildings. There's been a lot of interpretation of, well, it doesn't say in our ag exempt code that you can add plumbing or you can add electricity. Some people do have electricity and plumbing. So obviously in the past, it's been allowed or been approved, but currently it does not appear that the interpretation is that it is allowed or can be approved. So why not codify that and put it in there and explain exactly what are the abilities of electricity and plumbing in these buildings? And also offering to do a new minimum acre parcel from 10 acres to 5 acres. For temporary ag structures, again, same basic concept, setback restrictions, height and size restriction, fire safety standards for number of exits and distance between them, and allow approved cannabis operations to apply. And for the different type of temporary ag structures, hoop houses, I know that CDD had been working on a hoop house addition, and so they provided that to me in order to add it in here. Hoop houses are defined as what can be used for nurseries or for growing. Doesn't say that it can be used for storage, doesn't say that it can be used for drying or anything like that. Currently, that's the way the definition is in our current code. What we would be adding to the restrictions is no mechanical or electrical or heat producing equipment in there, no CO2 enrichment, and if you're not using the hoop houses, that they need to be removed. And we talked about that when we did the hoop house stuff over in Big Valley, that we just want to make sure because we know that the elements can be pretty rough on some of the hoop houses. And then for the temporary drying, shipping containers and general purpose tent, I'm not sure if you've ever seen, for the lack of a better term, like an army tent, very thick canvas, not a little bit more, much more fireproof than your typical tent that you would think of, with metal skeletal framework. Used for storage or drying. Generators, I spoke with Air Quality District, and they looked over the ordinance changes and provided me the exact definition and wording that was needed. As long as you have an Air Quality District approved generator, that you can go ahead and use one. 60-day minimum for the amount of time that shipping containers and general purpose tent that are temporary can be there, and no more than 2 years consecutively. The idea is to get people towards an ag exempt building that is permanent, that looks good, rather than temporary on and off. That is the whole reason for that. Now, for those who want permanent shipping containers, there is already an avenue to make those things happen. I'm also proposing to define general purpose tent and shipping container. And then in my conversation with the fire districts, they have concerns on they're being called out for things that they're not receiving fire mitigation fees for. And so to me, if we're going to codify electricity in our ag exempt structures, that at this point I'm looking at the amendment of a fire mitigation fee so that instead of saying that ag buildings that are exempt, ag exempt buildings are exempt from the fire mitigation fees, I reworded it to say agricultural buildings requiring an exempt building permit that are not connected to a power source. So basically, if you have no power and you have an ag exempt building, then no mitigation fees. If you have power going to those buildings, then mitigation fees. So here's the feedback that I received. I want to make sure that I'm transparent with the feedback. This is what I put together based on all of the discussions and conversations that I had. The Farm Bureau questions the addition of cannabis access to ag-exempt structures. I tried to provide some California code and county code to suggest that it can be. questions the need for restrictions on an already over-regulated industry. These are things that we're hearing as we're going through Ag Venture. But at the same time, the restrictions that I am providing for today, I can't say 100%, but my belief, and especially with speaking with Rebecca Harper from the Farm Bureau, that the majority of what already exists as a ag exempt building would still be eligible based on the restrictions that we're looking at right now. Cannabis Alliance, not just cannabis, they want hoop houses for drying. That is one of the concepts that they employ. In speaking with multiple people about this, this is just not something that is that we're comfortable with offering, but that's something that the Cannabis Alliance is looking for. They also want a larger footprint for the dry sheds because there is limitations on the footprint based on the agricultural operation that you're doing. And the fire districts also spoke of fire mitigation fees for all buildings, since all buildings create potential hazards of varying degrees, and all buildings can burn, and we are in a different era. So I want to hope that I provided all of the right feedback that I received. And part of this is obviously we're looking at an industry, hemp, that struggles to have access to these types of dry sheds and things, but also cannabis, which we want to keep here, and we still don't have that, what I believe is the right pathway for them to be able to finish up their harvest in the correct way. We just had an appeal where somebody put up dry sheds and we weren't able to figure out how to get them approved for any type of dry sheds, and that appeal was approved, and they were not able to continue their operations in the future. I want to make sure we solve that. I want to make sure that we provide the right solution. Maybe this is not the right solution, but this is exactly why. The consideration today is, if approved, it goes to the Ag Advisory Board, where the changes and feedback and recommendations can be collected. Goes to the Cannabis Task Force, where again the feedback and recommendations can be collected, sent over to the Planning Commission for final review, and then brought back to us from the Planning Commission for, again, final consideration. And what I'm hopeful is that we can get this back before the end of January so that we can go ahead and make sure that this is codified and people can start planning to get these things developed and erected so that they can have the right implements and the right equipment to be able to finish their harvest in the right way. And hopefully that's the summary.
All right. Any questions from the board?
I don't have any at this point. I'd like to hear from the public and the folks that want to speak on this issue as we move forward.
So we'll do
That's me.
that. All right. So go ahead and open it up to the public for public comment. If there's anyone here on behalf of this item, please come up to the microphone, state your name for the record, and we'll give you your time to speak.
Good morning, everybody. Willie Cepeda, Lake County Fire Chief. Our concern in the Lake County Fire Chiefs Association is that every building, whether it be an ag exempt or temporary, poses a threat that we have to respond to, and we discussed a 50% requirement on any building that goes up because it does impact us. And our mitigation fees are for facilities and equipment only. You know, you look at a new fire engine, it's $750,000, and so we rely on those funds. My other concern is these temporary tents you were talking about, the military canvas, are highly flammable. They have oils and things like that, so they are extremely flammable and pose that hazard. As these buildings get put up, our biggest concern is the Public Resource Code 4290 and 91 access to these facilities, because throughout all of our fire districts, access to these buildings are compromised, our ability to get in there with our larger equipment and to be able to provide a safe means of egress when we're evacuating. In the last 10 years, we really don't do fire suppression for an hour into the fire. We're evacuating and doing public safety. So it's imperative that we actually have a good means of ingress and egress with turnaround points, so that in a lot of these areas, it is thick with brush. And of our crews going in there, they need to have what we call a safe refuge area, a turnout, an area to turn around and to be able to make a defensible stand. But you know, with these temporary buildings, we still respond to calls for there. And I have two in my district that were ag buildings that when we seen them putting power, when we went back after them. So I know that there's not enough staff to be able to go out and police and make sure they haven't gone from that ag exempt or a temporary to a permanent, but the ones right across from Ellis Ranch. and he's putting electrical in, and we stopped by, and it's like, he paid his mitigation fees, and it's hard to police those, but it's a definite impact on us for any building that goes in, and the other 50% could be paid when they change that occupancy, or they're going to put the electrical and those water and those other components that actually make it a more viable change of occupancy per se. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning, Board. I'm Sarah Bodner, the Policy Director for Lake County Cannabis Alliance. And I just want to start off by saying how crucial this item is and that we're glad it's being discussed today. I know that the Board had expressed a desire to handle drying structures as part of a comprehensive ordinance. And since we're not there yet and that's still being developed, we're very glad that we're talking about this. There would be a lot more farmers here today, but they're busy farming. And soon they're going to need a place to process their crops. And once again, we're in that sticky situation where we don't have that in place for the harvest season. So if we had just one request of the Board today, it would be that we uncouple the ag exempt structure building from the temporary drying structure authorization. The ag exempt structures ordinance is complex. It's going to require a lot of input and deliberation from traditional farmers and folks beyond cannabis. The fire districts, many different stakeholders are going to need to be part of that process, and that could weigh down our deliberations over temporary drying structures. So we think both are critically important. We need policy and regulations around both. But if we could make one ask of you today, it would be that you recommend that the Cannabis Task Force specifically take up temporary drying structures for cannabis and hemp and not group it all together so that we can move both forward with appropriate stakeholder input. We did have a number of other recommendations. I think that those can be taken up through the Cannabis Task Force, which is designed to get input from the industry as well as other community stakeholders. But with your direction today, we would request that you would separate the two into two different resolutions so that we can move them forward more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Van Pelt, Lake County residents. I'm glad, Mr. Sabatier, you mentioned the appeal. I was the one that filed the appeal. I was the one that had to listen to the drying sheds for their whole time. I'm glad you went to air quality, but I think there should be some noise mitigation measures. The setbacks aren't enough. I was 4/10 of a mile away and they were well above their nighttime noise decimal levels. There's a whole lot of things, and I understand that they need drying sheds, but where do the citizens come in for their need for drying sheds to the citizens' need for peace and quiet at nighttime hours? There's a whole lot of planning that needs to go on, and just to try and satisfy one group to make another group angry is not the answer either. So I would recommend before passing this ordinance that we go back to air quality, get some mitigation measures for noise, not only diesel particulate pollutions, which you did, and thank you for that, but noise. These fans are large, they make a lot of noise, and I know some of you witnessed it, saw it, heard it, but together as a group to activate something now because they need it is not the answer to make other parts of the group suffer. Thank you.
Paul Duncan, South Lake County Fire, CAL FIRE, North Division Operations. Safety knows no bounds with this ordinance. We are required to respond to these calls when these drying sheds, these temporary structures catch on fire or there's a medical call there. So any variance on the road safety, I just can't stand by and watch it happen. We need to be able to get fire trucks into there. There's an expectation of that. We need to be able to get ambulances into these locations. So the road standard is what it is for the safety of not just those people out there working in those temporary structures. Even though they say there's no occupancy, if work is being done inside a drying shed with clipping and trimming, that is an occupied structure. So those calls for service happen regardless of whether there is a means to get out there. So oftentimes we are forced to have other measures to get resources out to those calls. So I want to just reinforce the fact that it's a safety item for us, and also safety for the community, because fires start in those locations, and us being able to access those quickly and extinguish them is very important. I'll speak on the district side. We are out several $100,000s for mitigation fees that are not collected on these structures. So there is a level of frustration with that, that we keep putting a Band-Aid on the problem and not fixing it with mitigation. And as Chief Cepeda said, a new fire engine is $750,000, a new ambulance is $300,000. All this equipment costs money, as does the staffing. So by not supplying the mitigation, it really does affect our ability to respond to these calls, and the public expects that we're going to be able to go out there. So nobody goes into these buildings thinking there won't be a fire response out there. That's without a doubt, we will respond, but just make it safe for those that are out there and for the responders that are on the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Morning. Michael Green. Already submitted an e-comment and strong support. This is just the resolution of intent. This starts the ball rolling. This kicks the can down the road to the task forces, ultimately to the Planning Commission. And as I asked in the comment, let's set them free. Let's let them kick the tires really, really hard. There are some issues that were raised here today that they may want to address. But it's striking to me that we're here. This is such a long overdue discussion. Here we are years down. We shouldn't have to be parsing this at this late date, and yet here we are. Part of that is the complexity of the building structures that are available now, the ebb and flow of cultivation practices, not just in cannabis and hemp land, but in ag as general. The fire road standards keep coming up, and I want to be very
I have your.
Wow, that's a fast 3 minutes. I want to be sensitive to that because I know it's a complicated issue, and but it strikes me that this really harkens back to some of the land use decisions that were made 6 years ago when the original ordinance was done. And when we're popping up structures out in the hills and the rural residential and the rural lands, and we don't have access, we have fire chiefs saying we need to get in there and all that. We have a subdivision proposed in the west side of West Side Park in the city of Lakeport, and I can't give away an emergency vehicle access to that project. It's ironic to me. So I think part of it is the original land use decision that was made several years ago that pushed cannabis and hemp development out into the hinterlands. If these same projects were coming into our established farmlands, we would have built environments, we would have drying sheds, we would have fire road access already established, and we wouldn't be trying to reinvent the wheel out in the hinterlands. That's not before you today, but I do think we'll come back and talk about land use in the future, hopefully. But in this, we're just asking to give some clarity, some definitions to the structures that are already being used. We're trying to give access to cannabis and hemp to agricultural operations that are allowed under state law and are not quite clear under the county ordinance at this point. So this is very important work. It is somewhat technical. I think some of these issues can be parsed off. I think fire road access will be taking a look at that from time to time again. But I think where there's a will, there's a way. And I think this board should have the will to plow through this, pass this resolution of intent, let the committees and the Planning Commission give their good input. And I think you'll have a really good result when it comes back to you in January. Thank you.
Anyone else in the chambers? I have some on Zoom. We'll start with the top. Loy Pascarella. I see that If you can unmute and state your name for the record, we'll go ahead and hear your statement.
Thank you. My name is Lori Pascarella, and I'm a compliance specialist in the cannabis industry, working with some Lake County cultivators and others in Sonoma County. The Ag Exempt Amendment, as it's currently written, does not go nearly far enough. Additional considerations should be taken by this board for changes to the amendment to best help the Lake County cannabis industry to compete and to be able to remain in compliance. Drying and curing cannabis crop is absolutely critical to cannabis quality. This county must allow for temporary drying structures as a function of cannabis cultivation for the county industry to compete. And this Board of Supervisors must turn temporary drying tents or sheds into an urgency resolution separate from this Ag Exempt Structure Amendment, because this year's crop is at stake. Fire mitigation fees should be required for all building permit fees, including Ag Exempt and temporary structures, in order to support the fire emergency response in the region. This is something that we as an industry absolutely are willing to do and believe that it's necessary. So there should be no questions on that. Hoop houses, these are critical to protecting crops. They protect them from excess UV radiation, crop, drift from other spray, dust, other things. So this amendment should be updated to read that the framing should be in order to include metal, PVC, or other similar tubing, which allows for more sustainable options, just other than restricting to plastic tubing. These structures are, they can be done in a really good, clean, fire-safe, sustainable manner, and the ordinance needs to just allow for that. Climate control in cannabis storage structures is absolutely necessary to preserve the quality and to create a more marketable product in a very highly competitive market. This amendment should be changed to read that mechanical installations should be allowed in Ag Exempt structures and drying structures with a permit and prior approval of the Community Development Director and with associated fire mitigation fees. And then limiting operations to 100 amps of power does not allow enough power for all cultivators' operations needs. Power should be based upon the given site's operational needs and approval of permitting and inspection. And since PG is historically slow at providing services, a generator use should be allowed during the entire interim period that a cultivator is waiting for PG&E service. This is critical to be able to, operate a water pump or run a camera system, just minimal things. And also, this county needs to look at the fact that California legislators are currently looking to update cannabis regulations to allow for light deprivation on outdoor cultivation. And so this amendment should also allow for low voltage mechanical systems with a permit and prior approval of the Community Development Director. These are all things that are necessary to make the Lake County cannabis industry competitive with the rest of the state.
Is expended. So if you can wrap it up, please.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time and all of your work in developing these amendments that will help your county and industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ron. If you can unmute and please state your name for the record, and we can hear your statement.
Good morning, Supervisor. My name is Ron Ferraro. I represent Bango Distribution Elion Cannabis, a vertically integrated company that cultivates, processes, and distributes cannabis statewide, including Lake County. I'm proud to say Elion ranks as one of the top best sold brands in the state of California. I'd like to start off with first thanking you all to take a look at time to put together these amendments in regards to Ag Exempt structures support cannabis cultivators. However, I'd like to raise up a couple of points for your consideration. Beginning with the Ag Exempt structures, a structure that is meant to hold cannabis cannot be climate controlled to a certain extent, does not suffice for proper cannabis storage. I would recommend that this amendment be changed to read that all mechanical installations shall receive prior approval of Community Development Director. Additionally, 100 amps is not enough to service a 15,000 square foot square foot building. If permits and inspections are required at electrical installations, I don't see a need to limit 100 amps. Moving on to hoop houses, I think the language similar tubing is extremely vague. Suggestions to use PVC. In my cultivation sites, in other jurisdictions, I have moved completely away from PVC and used metal tubing to construct our hoop houses. PVC is non-UV rated plastic that is meant to be buried and hold water pressure. doesn't last long in the sun, and especially under pressure of being bent like a hoop. PVC pipes used in this fashion tend to splinter and crack, and with no safe way to secure plastic to these without the use of wood framing and puncturing the plastic membranes that become hazardous under heavy wind loads. Metal frame hoops will allow for much cleaner sites and sustainable operations. They can easily be removed each year and reused the following year. Reuse of plastic membranes reduces plastic waste. Additionally, with the state looking into updated cannabis regulations to allow for light deprivation on outdoor licenses, I recommend allowing low voltage mechanical systems with prior approval by the community development director. These types of systems will allow cannabis operators to operate at a much efficient cost and have the opportunity to actually compete in this very highly competitive California market, which I believe Lake County is one of the most ideal locations in this whole state, and I've had farms all over the state. Thank you for your time and your work in developing these amendments. Respectively, Ron Ferraro. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have phone 6205. If you can unmute, state your name for the record, and we'll hear your question.
Hi, this is Bart Levinson, and I feel pretty nervous about this. I'm going to speak as a citizen who attends your meetings, attends the task force meetings, and attends the planning commission meetings, and is pretty familiar at this point with the staffing shortages in the county. We all know that the Community Development Department, Code Enforcement, are working at their limit currently. So it doesn't seem to me appropriate to allow the industry to come in and pressure the county to do something that the industry started on their own to grow here, knowing the conditions that were here. The way that the industry comes to in front of you and cites that their whole existence is threatened unless you act immediately is bullying. And from a citizen's point of view, it's not okay. To have the fire chiefs come before you today, the fire chiefs who have saved us from catastrophic fire this year, those people, we must listen to them. Over and over again, we see commercial grows adding 40 to 80 trucks delivery per day to roads that don't have shoulders, roads that are essential evacuation routes, roads that weren't designed for industrial use. I appreciate that Lake County wants to grow a cannabis industry, but do it consciously, do it with your fire chiefs, do it with the safety and well-being of all in mind. Don't be bullied by an incoming industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Jennifer K. Smith, if you'd like to unmute and state your name for the record.
This is Jennifer Smith.
Right.
Good afternoon. This has been a lengthy process. It's a process that we've tried to address several times over the past few years, and I want to make sure that it's understood that we are not expecting this to be decided today, and I think that some people think we're pushing for this to be decided today. We certainly aren't. There's been a lot of great commentary today, and I think what we're seeing is that there's more input that needs to be given to this. As the cannabis industry, we're on board paying road mitigation fees. We're on board paying the fire department fees. We're on board with safety and doing the right thing. We're asking for our agricultural product to be considered, to be able to use the ag exempt buildings that are offered to all agricultural products in the county and the state. As mentioned earlier, we are classified as an agricultural product. As speaking to the temporary structures, this is nothing that's going to get done this year. We're well aware of that. We just need something moving forward so that there is time to transition. The building process is slow. The PG&E process is slow. As a sustainable industry, We need a path forward to get to permanent structures, whether they be ag exempt or not, whether they're U classification or not. Some people might want an FS1 building. All of these are input that needs to be taken. It needs to be considered. I know that the plan is to send this to the Planning Commission, the Ag Committee, the Cannabis Task Force, and that's the process I think we just want to see moved forward. And as regarding the state rules are ever changing, and that's where we get into the point of hoops that are now going to be allowed. Sorry, light deprivation specifically is going to be allowed on outdoor licenses. Again, this is another curveball that we need to be prepared to pivot on. So I urge the board to consider this and continue its path forward through whatever decision-making process we need to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public before I close public input? All right, I'll close public input, bring it back to the board. Supervisor Sabatier or Vice Chair Pyska.
So I agree with this conceptually, but I think that there is a lot here, and from some of the input, maybe too much in one resolution. What we've developed with the task force and our advisory councils is the pathway for developing policy. So, and the other priority we've set is to look at the whole ordinance holistically and stop with the hodgepodginess that we have been adding to the existing ordinance over the last several years. So what I think in concept, I agree to this, moving it to the task force, but also making sure it aligns with, you know, what are their priorities? What are they already working on right now? Because whatever they're working on right now is going to get sidelined. And is this the highest priority? This is not something that's going to change this year's harvest. It is a high priority. I want to see from the task force where it falls in the strategy of the work that they're already doing and where it falls with the priorities of the tasks that they're already looking at. And we do know that there are some laws that are going to be changing and effective the beginning of the year. So I think there's a lot of stakeholders. There's still a lot of input that needs to be gathered. I like the bullet points and I like the concept. It's really difficult to, or there's a big difference, I'd say, between reviewing something and developing policy. And if we're pushing this document to be reviewed, I think it's going to get a lot of redlining and crossed out and mixed up. But if we offer a concept and some bullet points, I think we're going to get a lot stronger feedback from the advisory groups that that are going to be helping pull this policy together.
Supervisor Sabatier.
And so I'll respond to that. I know I asked for a January 30th. I'm flexible on everything that's provided. Again, my goal was to figure out how to not have what's been happening the last few years happen this harvest. I failed to meet that timeline, and I just didn't want the work to go to waste. So I'm flexible with everything. Pressure from the cannabis industry, absolutely zero pressure. In fact, they disagree with what I'm offering, not wholeheartedly, but we don't agree. We don't align 100%. So I don't know where that's coming from. It's a needed aspect. Right now, the difficult part is if you want to add a building, you got to go back to update your use permit. That right now, use permits are known to take potentially anywhere between 1.5 to 3 years. At what point will those things get approved while the industry waits to get the right amenities to actually complete a seed to harvest process? When it comes to 4290, I know that Supervisor Simon and I had a conversation about setting a 4290 standard for agriculture. We have not done that. And I know that I have failed to bring that forward. I've been waiting for a little bit more stability within the departments to be able to bring, but we need to bring that forward as well. And if it triggers commercial, then it triggers commercial, and 4290 needs to be met. That is already part of the standards that are in the conditions of approval, and we need to have those conversations so people understand. Before you ask for this, just know that it will trigger the extra work that you may need to do to your property to make sure that it's safe to access. Part of this entire process is also to enhance the code that we have to make it more safe, where right now there is no specifics for people to follow to make sure that we have a standard when it comes to ag exempt or any of those things. I know there's been an offer to split the ag exempt and temporary, and again, I'm okay with any changes that are proposed or will be done. My goal was temporary doesn't sound as safe or as aesthetically pleasing or as right. I want to see things that are going to be fully approved by the community development chief building inspector. That is just my vision. That doesn't have to be the end vision. The 100 amp limitation, by reviewing, I know the building inspector went to many different county sites as well to take a look, as did I, and 100 amps kind of seemed to be the limit. In my opinion, once we set a standard, if you go above that, then you just need to get a building permit, just like everyone else would have to. So I think we need to set certain limitations. As far as state updates, yeah, we need to be prepared to pivot, but until we know exactly what the ink is going to say when it's finalized, I don't think we should prepare to create ordinances or resolutions that change things ahead of time until it's actually approved and we know it's coming. So today is not that day where I think that we should be looking at implementing those things. Those conversations could happen. So hopefully if we take off the deadline, it can help with making sure that everything goes through the right process and it doesn't feel rushed. But I do want to make sure that this does come back before next year, where we find ourselves again in the same scenario where harvest season is coming and we know that makeshift temporary buildings are being propped up to make this happen. This is an industry that we've all shared our support, that we do want to see this continue in the future. And so I think that having not a specific deadline or timeline, but ensuring that this is in place before next year, so people have the chance to approach community development, develop what they need. Even if it's temporary buildings, you still need to get approval for the things that you will be doing, and all of that takes time. So again, willing to change whatever needs to happen. Didn't want the work to go to waste, and so wanted to make sure and bring it to the board.
All right. Supervisor Simon?
Obviously, very complicated conversations moving forward. So I am in support of moving this forward today to continue those conversations. I appreciate you, Supervisor Sabatier, saying not a time limit, but these conversations definitely need to happen. Yeah, it's challenging every year as we go through this. I know the industry that is being established is starting to take those steps forward, and we've supported as much as possible. But when you grow a product and you cannot finalize it, it doesn't make any sense. And we've got to get it figured out. And I completely agree. It won't be until next year. I appreciate the industry understanding that challenge, but we've got to get it done. Every year we come back, in the last 6 years that we've been doing this, or 5 years, that we've been growing product. As you hear, this industry is stepping up to the challenge. You know, the product that is grown here is starting to be well known, I think, across the state, and we need to just continue the industry to help that finalization in that process that needs to be done to complete the product. There are a lot of challenges that come, and you got people on both sides of the industry. Either you're for cannabis or not, and you know, we know there's fine lines. But realistically, for me, as a supervisor from day one, this is an ag product that we need to eventually get to that point where it's just like any other ag product that can be grown here. And it's with the federal government, with the state regulations, that makes it a challenge for us. So I know we're trying to walk those lines from what we have here, but there are plenty of complaints that we get, at least I do, for even the ag industry that we completely support here, the grape industry. You know, there's things that you have to do that affect community members that have lived here their entire lives. I can go to a specific example of 23 fans for frost protection that were just put up in a large agricultural area in Middletown, and you hear it for miles away, even my own home, 2 miles outside of town. Those 23 fans landing, it sounds like a helicopter invasion, which just started last year. I completely understand we're in an ag-supportive county. Try and take those constituents' concerns that aren't happy with it, try and have those conversations, and always give them a process to address that through appeals or public hearings, and that's really what we're here to do. So there is no bullying. This is something that was passed by the state of California. This is us trying to establish the industry here in Lake County that's legal, and we need to continue to do that. It is having positive impacts in our communities, and 10 years from now, I think it'll be completely different, the conversations we're having. So, you know, my thoughts are we can move it forward. As far as separating it at this point, I think we just move forward as is, as presented. Appreciate, like I said, removing the timeline because it is going to take time to do that. But I want to hear this, and I know in cannabis there's, you know, the season that goes on. I know it can go all the year round if you have the right permits, but making sure that we get this thing back to us, you know, February, March next year, so we can get it completed before the end of, you know, next 2023's drying season. So those are my thoughts on it.
All right. Thank you for bringing this forward. I'm pretty sure we're going to move forward with something today, and just wanted to say that, you know, with the regard to bringing it, things like this have been coming up quite frequently, and we have to figure out and pivot how to do it. We have to also keep in consideration of what's happened before, and look at what could be considered as pretenses or what's the word I'm looking for? I'll think of the word. But the bottom line is that once we solidify this, it gives the opportunity to bring it to the ad hoc committee, bring it to the different agencies to give their comments, beat it around and bring it back here to us. And so I think it's a great idea to allow that. That's what we created the ad hoc committee for. I understand there might be a priority thought on it, and I get that. I just know that with this being discussed amongst those entities and the Planning Commission, I think it helps us out to move forward with where we need to go on this. And still can't think of that word, but it'll come up, and I'll say it later. But precedence. That's the word. So anyhow, with that, if there's anything else, I think you have your
I do want to offer one change. Is I know that I said the Ag Advisory Board and I said the Cannabis Task Force. I'd like to send it to the Fire Chiefs meeting as well, so that we can make sure we get their feedback, because obviously we heard loud and clear today. I'm in line with what they're asking for. I did not put what they're asking for on the ordinance because it's not what I heard from the rest, especially when speaking with the Farm Bureau. And so I tried to go compromise in the middle, but I'd love to make sure we get their recommendations and their feedback directly from them, rather than waiting for them to have 3 minutes to speak to us. So that would be my change, unless, and if there's no more.
The whole reason it was, I tried to bring it at 10:30 was because I got a call from them, so it worked out. It may have been later or whatever, but it worked out, so go ahead.
Well, I think there's been a lot of changes that have been discussed, which is why I'd like to see the bullet points pushed forward and not the resolution, to give more flexibility for the advisory groups and the stakeholders to give their input without the confines of something that's already been written. So we know what we want to address, and we know the timeline. You know, we want to have this come back in the wintertime, February, or I'm not sure that January is going to work. You know, the Ag Advisory Committee doesn't meet until November. It's really dependent on farmer schedules. So that's why I'm in favor conceptually. I agree with what's been said here. It's just I feel like this document is going to be really cumbersome for the groups to work through, and that's why I think, you know, everything that you had in your presentation with the bullet points, you know, push that forward. Say this is what we want addressed. So we're not putting words in their mouths and having them try to, you know, figure out where their thoughts align with the text. But I think it's a more organic process that's going to come from those advisory councils if we give them the task of how to solve all of these problems, rather than work within the confines of a document. That's my concern.
Supervisor Sabatier.
What I'd like to suggest is that I can attach the presentation with that, and each group can choose to start with the, what I don't want is 3 separate ordinances coming from the Planning Commission, coming from the Ag Advisory, so sending what's there, sending the bullet points as well, and then they can make the decision on, we're going to ignore what was offered, and we're just going to go with the bullet points and say this is what we recommend because we don't like the way this is written.
Right, but we're not sending it out to all the advisory groups at the same time. I think we start with the Cannabis Task Force. And because obviously there's thoughts from the, in cannabis world of like, this needs to be uncoupled and separated and, should be a separate ordinance. So that's why I think start with the bullet points, start with the Cannabis Task Force, and then progress through the other advisory council and planning commission.
Supervisor Sabatier.
I would prefer not sending more of a blank slate. I think that starts the entire process over. That's already taken up some time. So I disagree, but glad to put it all together and they can choose how to progress.
So what I'm thinking is that once this, and if this is passed, it goes to all of the different groups that we identified, right? That would go there. Mm-hmm. Then with their collaboration and discussion, once it's brought forward, it's to the Planning Commission where they will vet or decide on what goes from there. Then that'll be brought to us. Okay.
So everything goes separately to all the advisory councils, then to the planning commission?
Mm-hmm. All of this will go to them plus this presentation, so they'll all get their version of it, decide how they want it, which is almost like having 3 different ordinances, but at the same time, then that will, those recommendations will go to Planning Commission. Planning Commission will say, okay, we all add this is our interpretation, this is what we like. That kind of gives them the opportunity to, decide on it the way we might decide on it in the future, and then go from there. So.
And then who writes it after the planning commission? Who pulls everything together? Is that going to be county council or how's, yeah?
Ms. Grant,
Okay.
yeah.
Yes, I saw it.
She said yes.
She
She said yes. I'm just thinking, I'm sorry for looking that way.
And just to add that I did have county council review and provide some feedback, and do appreciate, I forgot to mention county council for the work that she provided as well for the review before putting it in front of the board.
No, seriously, I'm happy to assist in drafting this. And obviously, all of these commentaries that come to your board are recommendations, but ultimately, any ordinance is decided by, right now, the 4 of you, because you're the ones who legislate on behalf of the county of Lake.
I see Maria had her hand up. Did you want to speak on this? Please unmute and we'll hear what you have to say.
Morning, thank you. Community development has standard processes for ordinance amendments that include agency review prior to going to the Planning Commission. If it pleases the board, we could go ahead and pick up this draft ordinance, move it forward through agency review, which would include the fire chiefs, synchronize or gather all of the agency comments and recommendations before we take it to the Cannabis Task Force. And then the Planning Commission, and then back to your board.
And the Ag Advisory.
And Ag Advisory, actually that Ag Advisory, yeah, we'd probably keep that within the agency review as well. So, but that, we could integrate that all into a process that's very similar to what we do on an everyday basis.
Quick question for Director Turner. Because I want to make sure that we don't waste anybody's time, and that if you do an agency review and then it goes into the hands of the Cannabis Task Force and it goes in the hands of the fire chiefs and the Ag Advisory Board, where to me that's where the largest change could occur from, that then you would be offering an ordinance that's a little bit more towards the finalized version that's being prepared for the Planning Commission for other agencies to review, rather than kind of more of a raw source material that still has that potential to get that strong feedback from those groups that really could change the ordinance.
Noted. we could switch the path.
But I do
Start
like
with
the,
the task force for their recommendations and then send that out for agency review.
I do like the agency review, and if that's already a part of your process anyways, then that would be the case before it goes in front of the Planning Commission.
All right. Thank you, Director Turner. I appreciate that input.
If I could ask one favor, just a little clarification on timeline. It sounds like we're sort of settling more towards completing the process to get back to the board by February and March. Is that correct? Because I've heard take away the timeline, the deadline, but have it back before the beginning of the year. So if you could just get a consensus on that, that would help us a lot. Thank you.
And I would suggest by spring, which is at least, March 21st to June 21st, to make sure that you have enough time and that we can finalize it before winter comes for when harvest season occurs.
Thank you.
Just to open that up a little bit more on the calendar.
I would agree with that.
Okay. All right. Ms. Grant? Oh, okay. From that, I think we can...
Mr. Chair, I offer the resolution with the amendment to send it to the Fire Chiefs Association and follow the RFR process after all feedback has been given back from those groups.
Resolution has been offered. Please conduct the roll call.
And I will attach the bullet point PowerPoint.
Supervisor Simon?
Yes.
Supervisor Sabatier?
Aye.
Supervisor Pyska?
Yes.
Supervisor Crandall?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Resolution passes, and so with that, we'll take that route and move forward on our agenda. And first, I'll entertain a break. We're going to come back and do 7.7, but we'll take a brief 5-minute break and come back at 11:41. All right. Welcome back. I know it's a little longer than expected, but it's 11:49. If we can conduct this till around 12:30 and then take our break then, was everyone okay with that from the board's perspective and staff?
Are we coming back at 1:30 or 1?
We'd be coming back at 1:30 if we take the lunch at 12:30. Okay, if everyone's good with that, we'll move forward. 7.7, discussion and consideration of the county's contractual relationship with Elijah House and the retention of an outside auditor to review and assess contract and funding compliance, appropriations, and expenditures. And I'll go ahead and start out as I brought this forward to the board. If you've got a chance to read the memorandum, as you know, Elijah House recently seized vacated the juvenile hall that we have been trying to work with them on for the housing issues in Lake County. And so with that, they provided a letter and talked about some of the continuing work that was coming forward. And a lot of other things have taken place since then. Of course, there's media that has been writing articles about the situation as well in the town halls. There's been frequent discussion. In fact, last year during a town hall, it was discussed in May of 2021 that the group would be attempting during that time to work in Lucerne as an administrative capacity for the old visitor center on Highway 20. During that time, there was no implication that there would be any type of work with directly the homeless. It was more or less going to be more of an administrative type of deal. After that, fast forward to July when they stated they would vacate as of September 4th. They vacated a little earlier. And it was requested for them to meet with one of the MACs, and there was no one that came forward. I had talked to a couple folks. They had mentioned that they would continue in Lucerne on their own funding. However, they did mention HHAP funds. And that was never specified except for when they told me that, and then posted it online on their website that they would continue working out of Lucerne, renting and leasing from a private owner, but also continuing forward with that. In turn, that was a little surprising, and so I know that there's been a lot of discussion around it. I wanted to get this on the agenda so we can get to a point of discussing it and find out where we can go from here. I don't know, Anita, if you wanted to add anything to this or no.
I think you've covered it as an introductory matter.
Okay, thank you. And so I do know that, Todd, you're on, and I know that you've had some public inquiries and also some initial work when this very discussion started, because of course Elijah House initially was working with the county for emergency shelters and during COVID. And so I know from that point forward, we're at this point, and that goes back to 2020. And so I'll go ahead and give the floor to you if you'd like to give some insight or anything else, or have anyone else you would like to provide some insight. And I don't know if anyone from the Elijah House is online, but if they are online, I gladly would allow them to speak as well. So Todd, without further ado, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Todd Metcalf, Behavioral Services. In light of this item and the suggestion that an independent audit takes place, what I would like to ask or suggest is that I can work with my staff to pull all of the reporting, auditing, and monitoring documentation from the grants that have been awarded to Elijah House, and perhaps bring it back to your board next Tuesday so that we might be able to make a more informed decision. But I'm just kind of thinking out loud as far as how to move this forward. Because I think I think we might be enlightened by what I could bring to this board.
All right. Any questions for Todd? Supervisor Sabatier?
I want to thank Supervisor Crandall, or Chair Crandall, for bringing this for discussion. It's definitely been a hot topic for the public and also for our local media. And I think us not doing anything is not the response that our constituents expect from us. I think that there's more unbiased opinions if we look at an independent auditor to review this. And I think if what we anticipate is to have authentic transparency, I think that not going through the department is probably the better way so that there can be public trust in the report that we provide. So I want to ask a question. You brought up the Lucerne one, and here it asks for review of fiscal funding compliance. Is there a way to review use permit as well? Because is the permit that they received for the Lucerne one that would allow for that type of activity?
From what I understand, they don't have a permit because they're leasing from the owner of that property.
But wouldn't that property have some sort of, whether through zoning or through use permits, have a limited capability of what can and can't be done?
So I agree with you. I think there is a zoning specification on that property that would allow or disallow for specific things to happen. So, but I know that there was never a situation where they went for a use permit or anything like that. I know that there's been discussion around that from the public thinking that the county approved or disapproved that, but there was never something that came to the county on in regards to that. It was a private owner, and it just went from there.
So would you prefer getting the report from the audit and then making a decision whether or not to take a look at that, or do we want to simultaneously maybe request for code enforcement to review or for community development to review that facility use?
I would be open to that as well. Okay. I mean, I don't know if the others will, but I would be okay with that. And so, didn't know if you had any more questions or anyone had more questions for Todd. Or Todd, did you want to respond or have anything else to add to that?
No, but I'd still be more than happy to pull whatever reporting and documents we have around the funding that was provided to them for their homeless shelter operations at Old Juvenile Hall. As I've stated before, the funding that they've received there's no connection to this Lucerne facility whatsoever. So, and maybe it wouldn't be useful, but I'm more than happy to provide whatever information you need based on all of the auditing and monitoring we've done so far.
Supervisor Sabatier?
I just want to add that this was brought to my attention. Director Metcalf, you and I talked about this 9 months ago, maybe a year ago. It was an ex-employee that contacted me about some concerns about the financial stuff. I did ask Director Metcalf to provide me with a report. I received a report. I'm not an auditor, though, and so I couldn't find anything within the report to suggest that this was, that the funding was used for other issues that we were not contracted with them to do so. But I like the idea of an auditor professional looking those things over. I just wanted to at least make that public and transparent that I did take a look at it, couldn't find anything myself, but I've never had the job of auditing people's fiscal activities. So I'm very interested in this.
And so did you have anyone else that you would like to have speak? Director Metcalf, that's online with you?
No, well, I don't know if anyone from Elijah House is in the meeting if they wanted to speak, but no, I will just follow whatever directive you, whatever you need from me, I will provide.
Thank you. And so any other comments from the board before I open it up?
Just a question. Heard members here looking, I'm in support of this, obviously. Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, in support of moving forward with this from the auditor's standpoint. My question is, I didn't see anything unless I missed it, expected costs, where it's going to come from to do this. We don't have any of that yet. We'll get that when we get the proposal, so we're just trying to gauge. Okay.
Yeah, we, if I may, Chair, we don't know if it's going to be, we don't know the funding threshold, so it may be just quotes, written quotes, or we may have to put out an RFP, but we won't know yet until we investigate more.
The other question is this, so a forensic audit, is that what we're asking for, or we're just asking for an audit? Just a question.
I wouldn't necessarily say it was a forensic. What I'd like to hear from the board today is the exact, what goals you're trying to achieve. is it contract compliance, reporting compliance, use of funds? I think I'm listing them all, but.
I think you hit all three of those. That sounded.
Okay.
And
Well,
if I
there we
could
go.
add some more insights as well, one of the other things that, in dealing with situations like this, it's also very important because there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of inconsistencies in regards to discussing this with not only the entity, but when it comes to the public's confused about it. And so I know at times I've asked questions and they've turned out differently. And so in order to also protect the department to be protected in their statements and saying that, no, we're willing to bring forward what we need to, we've been doing X, Y, and Z, and we, so this would provide that, if that makes any sense. And I think it's considered a auditor to review and assess contract and funding compliance, basically. And so I think it does what it needs to ensure that we're doing our due diligence, and then also behavioral health is basically, if things are the way they say, then this provides that to do so. And with outside eyes, like Supervisor Sabatier said, looking in, it really gives us an opportunity to really dive deep. And so yeah, just I don't know if that helps with what you were stating. So, yeah. So is there anybody in the chambers with a comment or concern about this item? I'll open it up to the public. I'm not seeing anyone in the chambers. I do see a hand up on Zoom and phone 4550. If you can unmute, and we'll go ahead and open public input for that. So I'm not sure, not hearing you yet, but if you can work that. I think, what is it, *6?
Yeah, they're unmuted.
Oh, okay.
They went from muted to unmuted, just not hearing anything.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth Larson with Lake County News. So is the information that would be brought back next week, is that going to also discuss the vetting process that was gone through in order to decide to use Elijah House's services? Because that's a big portion of my concerns with this is, was this organization even vetted? Because it's out of compliance with the Attorney General's office and is basically lined up to have its nonprofit status revoked. And at the time that it came to the county, it was out of compliance for 4 of the 5 years it had been operating. So I'm concerned about that. So I'm curious to know, is that supposed to be part of what's going to be discussed next week? That's one of my concerns.
Okay. So I'll see if, do we feel that would be something, CAO Parker, do you think?
Well, the proposal to bring information back next week was made from Todd. If you want an independent audit, this will take some time. I won't be able to bring this back next week because I'll have to
Work on getting
yes,
a contract with it.
and get the materials and have them review it. I mean, it may be 30 days out. I do not know.
Okay. And so I see that Justin Ammon is online as well, but we'll continue with the questions that we have. And so I'm not sure if we can just ask that right now with Director Metcalf, or would you need more time to answer that, Director Metcalf, or about the vetting process? Maybe we could add that to the list of things to review. I think that would be more appropriate, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Because the RFP process went through the Housing Continuum of Care, which, as you know, we oversee that. So yeah, I could certainly bring that back. Or yes, we have that.
Okay. All right. So what I'll do is,
Okay.
so yeah, go ahead and continue.
So just let me ask one other question, since sort of the discussion today is taking a slightly different form than I anticipated. So regarding the sober living environment that Elijah House is running on Highway 20 in the former County Visitor Center at 6110 East State Highway 20, as Supervisor Crandall brought this up, it's my understanding that SLEs are not supposed to operate anywhere but in residential areas. And now that's just a cursory look. I'm not an expert like Maria Turner is on planning, but it's my understanding that that property's base zoning is commercial 1. Its full zoning is commercial 1 - parking - design review. So that doesn't seem to gel with where SLEs can be used. SLEs are sort of notorious for being not permitted, and unfortunately, cities and counties don't have a lot of control over them. But I thought the one control they had was that they're not supposed to be in commercial areas. And this is right on the scenic corridor. It's in a former county-owned building. People still stop there to ask for instructions and information about the County of Lake, and this is what they encounter. And this is one of the things that, as Supervisor Crandall mentioned, people were very concerned about at the Lucerne Town Hall last year. They asked this directly and were told no, and then this turned up. So that would be my other question for now, and I can certainly bring my other questions back when Director Metcalf has more information.
All right. Supervisor Sabatier?
Well, I'm going to push for, I kind of offered it, but now I'm going to say, looking for consensus to review the use of that facility or the use of that building, rather than just kind of an open question. But also the first part that was requested about the vetting, without saying more than I should, I think that's something that will be coming to us in the very near future, on a future agenda.
All right.
About the process of vetting and things like that.
Okay. And so, did you have any other questions? I still have like a minute 24 left for you on that, Elizabeth.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm getting used to using my phone for this. No, I think you've covered it for now. I am certainly happy to bring other, it sounds like these are going to be discussed in different ways in the future, so that's good for now. Thank you.
All right, thanks. So with that, I'm not sure if, but I do see that Justin Ammon is on. I see you raised your hand again. Okay. Justin Ammon, if you had anything to add or state in regard to this agenda item, welcome it gladly.
Thank you, Board of Supervisors. Thank you, Todd Metcalf. I am at liberty to express that no grant funding was used in any operations in Lucerne that were overseen by Elijah House. We had originally intended to continue to provide, and I believe you referenced HHAP funding, that would be specifically housing navigation. We had originally intended to continue that, but I have given Todd notice that we are not able to continue to provide housing navigation services. We had considered the Lucerne, but that has not turned out to be a fitting place to do housing navigation. So there are no allocated funds to Elijah House that will be used or were ever used in the Lucerne Visitor Center.
Thank you, Justin, for that clarification. Did you have anything else to add or any questions for Justin? All right, thank you. Any other public comments on this item? All right, not seeing any, I will bring it back to the board for direction and go from there.
I believe the direction has been
given?
stated.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Those three things we want to cover, as well as looking into the use of that facility, whether it fits within the zoning of what's allowed there. Yeah.
All right.
And then that it'll come back to us for what that agreement with an auditor, or whether it's an RFP or a whatever the process is that we need to acquire them.
Ms. Grant?
Excuse me, Chair, just for clarity, you may want to just restate the three things, just to make sure everyone understands.
All right. And go ahead, Ms.
Oh,
Parker.
no, go ahead.
No. You were just.
Contract compliance, use of funds, grant funds, and reporting obligations.
Right.
Including, and then adding the fourth, which is the vetting process.
Yes. All right. Is that amenable to the rest of the board, as a consensus?
I thought the vetting process is something that's going to come back to us at a different time in a future agenda.
It may be both.
Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Grant?
You'll have to excuse the lawyer in the room, but when you say contract compliance, what exactly do you mean by that?
That the person, both behavioral health and the contractor, perform their duties and responsibilities as outlined in the contract. And they fulfilled their obligations per the contract requirements.
That fits. And for example, just a quick example is like reporting in 6 months as it states in the contract, or things of that nature, having those type of things brought back to us so we can review and see if those things are being done, what the funding is being spent on, so we can assess if those things are properly being done. Ms. Grant?
So then what your board's looking for here is a compliance and fiscal audit?
Yes.
Okay, that's okay. I just wanted to, that obviously alters in terms of the board's search for someone independent, someone who can do both.
And the goal isn't just to specify or single out this group, it's to ensure that all contracts and situations are tended to properly so that we don't, open it up for other situations to occur as such, if that makes sense. So.
That's a learning moment.
Yeah.
And just a point of clarification, Chair, this specifically is for the Elijah House and its contracts that we're reviewing at this time. Any future audits with regards to other contracts can be brought up at a different time.
Right, thank you for that. I think that goes, yeah. Ms. Grant, anything else? No. All right, so I think we have direction, and we'll go from there, since it's basically been stated, correct? All right, with that, we will go ahead, and we're at 12:11. We'll go ahead and take our lunch break, unless there's something else that you want to cover real quick on this. I think anything else would probably take a little more time, so I'd rather just entertain the lunch break right now. It is 12:12. We'll just assume 12:15 is the proper time. Come back at 1:15. Move forward. I already stated that we would conduct 7.9 after lunch, so we'll jump right into that once we get back from lunch. Thank you very much, and we'll see you after lunch.